everyone, it is Colin.
I'm Harrison.
I'm Jackie.
I'm Derek.
I'm Chris.
I'm Joshua.
And this is our
APES Final.
Our project is based on the tragedy of the Commons Lab. We know that our commons are vital to our survival on this earth, so we decided to dive more in depth. During this project, we focus mostly on the oceans as a common.
So, we headed to Emeryville to interview Alan, a commercial and recreational fisherman. Alan commercially fishes for Dungeness crab and sport fishes for halibut and striped bass. He regularly takes customers out fishing on his boat to tigerfish. We asked Alan a few questions about our ocean commons to gain more insight into the topic.
Biggest threat to local fisheries, I would say the biggest threat all along really has been water resource. That's probably what the number one effect on our entire fishery. You always hear about the salmon, but water is really important, not just to salmon, but to pretty much all the fisheries: striped bass, salmon, halibut. Water flow is key. It's probably the most important factor. That's yet to be determined. Climate change is a relatively new thing, but what we see, I would say it has yet to be determined as far as climate change. Overfishing, I don't think, not the way we fish. Rod and reel fishing is definitely not going to affect fish populations. Because we're so regulated and we're so controlled, and we have limits on the number of fish we can catch, how we can catch them. So there's a lot of restrictions for this type of sport fishing. There's other types of fisheries, commercial fisheries. They use nets and they trawl nets. That's probably the most damaging as far as physically catching fish. The trawl nets are very hard to discriminate what they catch. Basically drag a net around, and whatever runs into the net is caught and killed. So, but as far as what we do, it's very sustainable and really shouldn't hurt the fishery whatsoever. The main thing we can do now, I would say, like I pointed out, is to really control what happens with our water resource. That is the most important thing, but it's so politicized now, and I don't believe the fishermen have the power to do anything about the water legislation. It's going to have to go out to beyond the fishermen. It's going to have to go out to the general population in our voting to really make a difference. There's not enough fishermen, just a fisherman, to make a difference. We need everyone out there to really understand what's going on with the water resource to make some corrections. What happens is, like for salmon, this is probably the easiest one to understand. The salmon need water in the rivers because what you guys probably know is the salmon return to the rivers to spawn. But if there's no water flowing out of the rivers and into the bay and into the ocean, the salmon can never smell the water where they were born, and they don't know when to go back up the rivers. And even if they do try to go back up the rivers, they find that when they get up there, there is no water. There's no water for them to lay their eggs and for them to spawn. So it's really damaging for the effects. And that carries through to other fisheries. You know, we need water flow. That's basically what it comes down to. Dams and water diversion, selling the water is the key. That is the key. You're going to have droughts. You're going to have years with high rainfall like we had this year. That's just part of the nature's cycle. But when you interrupt nature with the dams and diverting water flow, That's man's part. So you're always gonna have natural cycles, but when you have the artificial interruptions, that's what's key.
Awesome. I think that's it.
Learning about how water resource affects our ocean commons is an interesting situation for us as citizens. Dams and irrigation systems are extremely beneficial to humans, as they are ways of increasing crop production and controlling water flow. What some do not realize is that these advancements can adversely affect fish populations, especially salmon, which begs the question, how do we balance these two?
A specific example of needing to preserve our commons is with the canary rockfish. Canary rockfish were in high demand as fishermen sought after the species for their taste and popularity. This led to them being overfished. These rockfish tend to take a long time to grow and reproduce, so they eventually ended up producing less fish than those being taken out. This made their replacement level incredibly hard to achieve. By 2000, they were placed under the ESA's threatened list, and only recently in 2017 has the fish been taken off of the list. Many California fisheries are still hesitant to catch them, as seen in the bait shop at the harbor. However, this is a success story of preserving the commons.
A few days later, we drove out to Half Moon Bay to experience firsthand our ocean commons, specifically the tide pools. Overfishing, as well as many other human activities, can negatively affect our tide pools.
So we're here at the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve in Half Moon Bay, and we're here to just learn about how human activity can lead to the destruction of commons, especially in a tide pool area. So that's species like shellfish, and it can also lead to algal blooms, which can affect other marine life. Also here we have a lot of other species such as harbor seals and different fish, and what that's going to teach us is just how the ecosystem works and about keystone species.
The tide pools are a great way to see how an ecosystem can be imbalanced easily, and it is a way to see the fragility of our commons. The tide pools themselves are commons that humans use every day. Most shellfish are farmed, but some are collected from tidal areas. Many collect species of kelp from tidal areas, and tidal areas are used as recreation. One problem that impacts the tide pools is algae blooms, called red tides. These are caused from humans having too much agricultural runoff from fertilizers. When this runoff happens, the nitrates in the water allow for the growth of poisonous algae, which kill several marine species and disrupt the ocean environment as a whole. Events like this have disrupted all shellfish farms and ocean commons. Humans, being poisonous to this algae, can consume shellfish and can be poisoned from a neurotoxic shellfish poisoning. This can be detrimental to shellfish populations, both farmed and wild, and detrimental to human jobs and revenues. In 2011, a devastating red tide left thousands of shellfish and invertebrates dead and decaying. This is a prominent example of how humans affect the commons. One of the primary victims in this red tide is the abalone population. Abalone, as a commons, were detrimented, forcing the Fish and Games Department to ban the capture of abalone for a couple of years. This hurt not only wild populations, but farm populations, as many shellfish were deemed inedible. The red tide kills shellfish by poisoning them or by leading to algae death, which leads to the consumption of oxygen by bacteria and suffocation of the invertebrate.
While exploring around the tide pools, we noticed that there were very few starfish living there. From research and word of mouth, we have heard that since 2013, starfish have been in rapid decline due to a virus called the sea star wasting virus. We safely assumed that human activities helped to cause it. If a keystone species such as the starfish were to commonly disappear from the tide pool commons, there would be an overgrowth in mussels, who would outcompete other species such as limpets and chitons. This would create an unhealthy imbalance in the common and a loss in biodiversity. After seeing this for ourselves, we wanted to learn more. According to Natural Geographic, the virus had randomly flourished, and scientists have connected this virus to human-caused climate change and ocean acidification due to excess CO2 in the atmosphere. They claim that ocean acidification could have weakened the starfish, leading to their vulnerability to the virus.
Starfish are an extremely important species, along with another species, sea urchins. On our trip, we did not see very many sea urchins. Urchin decline has been seen, and it could be possibly connected to starfish decline. Scientists blame this decline on a pathogen as well. This pathogen likely is related to human-caused climate change, with the ocean acidification leading to urchins losing their spines and making them more vulnerable to predators and disease. While urchins are not keystone species like starfish, they are a significant source of food for sheephead fish, otters, starfish, and lobsters. Not only are they a food source, they are also extremely important to maintaining and regulating the kelp population by eating it. Without sea urchins, kelp can overgrow and take over, leading to the outcompetition and habitat destruction of species. In terms of how this affects humans, Urchins have been an important part of our ocean commons as a whole because we rely on them as a commodity. Urchin gonads or uni is a significant part of Japanese cuisine and are seen as a luxury. To lose urchins would be detrimental.
From our trip to the tide pools, we learned about how fragile our ocean commons really are and how human activities can directly cause their destruction. The next day, we drove out to Crab Cove Visitor Center to meet with Michael Charnowski, a naturalist who works for East Bay Parks District. Michael explained to us his perspective on commons and how we can best preserve them.
The naturalists for the East Bay Regional Park District are educators, interpreters, and we interpret the natural and cultural environment for the public, and especially Alameda and Contra Costa counties. So for students in Alameda, if they come here for a program, we'll take them on tours around the bay at Crab Cove. We'll take them tours around our mud flats, rocky shore. So we'll teach them about the natural environment that's surrounding them, the San Francisco Bay. Quotas help the government regulate the fishing industry. Fishing, not only for commercial fishing, but also for recreational fishing. And so if people could fish as much as they want, the overfishing problem would actually be much worse than it is. I mean, in general, our oceans, some oceans are overfished, some areas of the oceans are overfished, some species are overfished, and some are not. And what quotas do is it helps the government keep the oceans and the fish populations healthy. Overall, well, we know that climate change is a big threat. That, of course, is something that we're learning about as it's happening. Right? If it's forest, we're talking about logging in general, and we're talking about habitat destruction. Some forests, you could say, it might even be fire prevention. Might actually, in the long term, cause forest health to decrease. But I would say overall, it's habitat destruction is the biggest thing. Now that's a very large statement. Habitat destruction depends on where you're talking about. It has much different causes, right? So it depends more specifically who and where you're talking about. I think that United States, despite some of the changes in our political environment, we have some protections that allow us to preserve our natural environment a lot more effectively than other places do. It tends to be the poorer countries in general where their natural environment is most at risk. And if you go, whether it's South America, Southeast Asia, African countries, that some of the habitat destruction in those places is happening at a much more alarming rate than here. Now that doesn't mean that the people of those countries are at fault necessarily. It's companies in wealthy countries that are often the ones that are taking a lot of those resources out. But in general, probably the poorest countries are at highest risk of habitat destruction. It's affected it kind of how it has in many parts of the world and the country. Overall, if you look at the last many decades, our populations has grown incredibly, and with that, with all those extra people, there's a lot more impact on the bay. That said, the bay is a lot cleaner now than it was when I was in high school. I didn't live around here, but it is a lot cleaner, right? But it could be. There's a lot of work to be done. And as there's more and more people driving further and further distances, there's that much more pollution. However, cars are getting cleaner, becoming more efficient. So you've got some things which are getting better, some things which are getting worse. But overall, population growth has a very large impact on the environment. However, one of the biggest challenges is to making it so that every individual has a much less impact. So you could say that population growth overall has a big impact, but individually we are doing a better job now than maybe we were doing 20 years ago. You know? So those things are kind of canceling each other out. It's a great question, and it's a big question, right? What are the things that we can do that can make the biggest impact? Well, what are our biggest impacts? What? Transportation, right? Food choices. You might say, I recycle. That's really important, but that's easy, to be honest. I mean, recycling is the easiest thing we can do. So what are the things that we can do at home? Well, look at what we're buying. Consuming less stuff, if you will. Our food choices are really important. Buying locally, buying lower on the food chain. Right? If you're interested in overfishing, well, then there are fish that are overfished that we could buy in the store, and there are fish that the Monterey Bay Aquarium feels are relatively are not in decline, and so that we can eat those fish, and it's not nearly as impactful on the oceans. So we could make a big impact on what we choose to eat. So, and our transportation systems are huge in, whether it's our carbon footprint. Are we driving cars that spew out, getting 20 miles a gallon, or getting 50 miles a gallon? What can we afford to drive? Are we taking public transportation? Are we walking and bicycling as much as possible? So those are really big, huge things. So what are we consuming? Whether it's just stuff in general, our food, and our transportation systems. I think those are the three biggest things that we can do, in consuming less and in a more environmentally friendly manner.
Reflecting on what Michael stated about the Monterey Bay Aquarium's categorization of fish, there is an actual application created by the Monterey Bay Aquarium that acts as a guide to sustainable seafood. It shows users which fish are sustainable to eat and which ones are not by listing the methods used to catch the fish and the location in which they are caught.
For example, take a look at salmon. They rank each type of salmon from best choice to good alternative to avoid. Coho salmon from Washington should be avoided because the fishermen use drift gill nets, which bring in tons of bycatch and kill almost everything caught in the net. Therefore, it is not sustainable. But Chinook from Alaska is one of the best choices because they use trolls to catch salmon, which do not bring in very much bycatch and allow for the release of unwanted catch.
Splash, drip, drip, woo, splash. Ay. Slippery, whoa, excuse me, please me, please. I'm up, believe me, get beat, cause I'm flexing Rarries. You can bet on me.
Alright, so what happened here was we were trying to go home, but we're actually
We took a wrong turn.
We're actually on our way to.
And we're going to SF.
Hey, might as well
SF.
get footage in Embarcadero.
Alright, we're gonna get this is all planned.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yes,
Let's go!
We're going home.
Let's go!
Well, it's not gonna come in, first of all, but if it does, then we're gonna die, yeah.
Feeling like the wilderness explorer.
These fast rivers running down to the ocean means that they have high erosity and also high permeability. And
Here is, we have a special specimen. It's called a sea otter. As you can see, the sea otter has left the premise, but it has been breaking wood. Now, if you can see right here, it's an adult sea otter. It's left this. This is called a sea otter hand. This is usually what it uses. It's the finger of the hand. Now, because I'm an expert on this topic, I'll let Jackie Slow take it away. Go.
and they fight on the rocks, destroying it, making it a dam. But in the AP test, it had a dam. In that dam, you have to know everything about what's that called? Mangrove trees, and the mangrove trees are very important for them. Because the mangrove trees, they cause a lot of species to flow down, and they die, and the sea lions eat them.